Okay, so that's where we are now. Call and parable verses 1 through 4. Nathan is not seeing David on his own accord. God sends him. And when God sends you, that only makes whatever confidence and whatever courage you already had even more so. And God does not send Nathan immediately to bludgeon David with the sin that he had done. But instead, God allows Nathan the wisdom to put the wrong that David had done in the form of a parable so that David can get an idea, so that he can understand the wrong that was done. And it's a story of a rich man, a poor man. David has been at both ends of the spectrum, and it has to do with sheep. And David, once upon a time, was a shepherd. Any questions or comments at this point? Okay, going forward now to verses 5 through 7. Self-condemnation. Self-condemnation. And still reading in the New Living Translation. David was furious. As surely as the Lord lives, he vowed, any man who would do such a thing deserves to die. He must repay 4 lambs to the poor man for having stole with no pity. Then Nathan said to David, "You're that man." Now again, as I said earlier, Nathan puts a parable to David in terms that he can understand. And certainly we see 2 things out of this. Number 1, there is righteous anger. Because David understands what it is to be a shepherd without a lot of money. He understands the value of each animal. And if a man can only afford 1 animal and somebody snatches that animal and kills it, oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, that is horrible, especially when the person that perpetrated the crime already has more than enough. So we see, yes, David understands the parable. Yes, he understands the parable very clearly. And he is righteously angry at the fact that anyone can be so hard, so cold, so callous as to take a lamb from a poor man, and yet he already got enough lambs and goats and camels and cattle to feed an army. Now, there's a difference between understanding a parable and realizing the wrong that we have done. There's a big difference. Because while David can make the connection between the value of a lamb to a poor man as opposed to a rich man, he does not see that it's his own sin that Nathan is talking about. I mean, think about it. If we go back to that 11th chapter, what happens? First of all, David is in a place that he shouldn't be in. That at the time the sin with Bathsheba occurs, David is in his palace during the season that kings are usually out in the battlefield with their soldiers. Secondly, David is lusting after another man's wife. Well, first of all, he doesn't even know who she is.
But this says in David's case, it was not unusual for a king because he had a leader that he had confidence in.
Yeah, he did have a leader he was confident in.
Yeah, so it wasn't unusual for a king not to be out, fighting with the soldiers.
Yeah, there is that vantage point, but then again, the scripture clearly says that this was the time that kings were ordinarily out in the field. So, yeah, it was It wasn't that unusual for a king not to be out there, but then again, it still was the times that kings usually were. So that could be taken either way. But the fact is, while he was there at a place that he shouldn't have been.
But the fact that he was not there with his men is not what caused his problem.
Oh no. But sometimes when we're not at the place where we ought to be, that's when we get tripped up. When we're not at the place where we are, sometimes that's when we get tripped up. And this is where David is getting tripped up, because first there's that lust. Now wait a minute, David, you got all these wives and concubines, and you gonna stand there lusting at somebody and call one of your other women. And then, not only that, he takes the time to at least ask who she is. Another man's wife? You already got wives and concubines. Go ahead to one of them. Gets her pregnant. Tries to cover it up by inviting the husband back from the battlefield. Say, hey man, how you doing? Glad to see you. How's everything? Look, go home, sleep with your wife, and talk to me in the morning. And Uriah, for his part, does not fall for the trap. Not that Uriah knew what was going on, but Uriah is just so loyal. Dedicated to the purpose. Thank you, Deacon Mix. Dedicated to the purpose that, he simply doesn't want to do it. So David sets up a battle where Uriah immediately gets killed. And then after Bathsheba grieving the death of her husband, David then takes her up and marries her as if to cover up everything. And the thing about this part of the lesson is that we find that if you keep on lying and doing wrong and doing more wrong to cover up the wrong that you already did, eventually you get blind to the wrong that you've done. You don't even notice it. Even though it's being told right in front of you, you don't even notice it. Here it is, Nathan is clearly laying out the story for him. And poor David is so blind by his sins that he doesn't even realize that Nathan is talking about him.
And it says that David is a man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
So it goes to show that even the best of us.
Even the best of us. If you would, please, sir.